This is video 2 on two-dimensional arrays and nested for loops. All right, this one, if you were a little fuzzy on the last one, this one probably just looks all kinds of nasty. All right, so if you're just looking at this and getting freaked and didn't understand the first one real well, I would go back and watch the first one again. All right, there's no hard coding um, variables into the elements within the two-dimensional arrays. So we're going to populate them by using a nested for loop, right? This is going to populate the two-dimensional array, and this nested for loop is going to print out the two-dimensional array. All right, so let's get started. Now, now that we've had an introduction, we're going to do this a little more professionally. Guys, when you're defining and assigning a two-dimensional array, it's best not to put numbers inside of here. The best way to do it is to define and assign constants like I've done here. I've got a constant rows equals 4, a constant columns equal 4. All right, the reason that this is a better practice is because, look at this, we're talking about assigning a two-dimensional array, then printing a two-dimensional array. We want to make sure that these are identical, the same size. So if I've got this 4x4 array, if I decide, hey, I probably should go 5x5, I change it here and it's done for both of these nested for loops. All right. So it's just a good practice to get into. So I'm making a 4x4 array. I'm defining and assigning two constants, rows 4, columns 4. So always know that the first one of these in the square brackets or the is always rows, and the second one is always columns. All right, populating this 4x4 array, 4x4 two-dimensional array. Right, I've got my nested for loops. Right, the outer one, I'm using the same thing you saw before, int I equals 0, while I is less than rows, which is 4, and I plus plus. On the inner for loop, I've got the j's again. All right, j equals 0 all the way up to j equals j, while j is less than columns, which is 4. So that should look pretty familiar to what we saw in the last video. The working line is total arrays ij equals I. All right, let's work through this and we'll talk about what that means. All right, start into my nested for loop. Int I equals 0, while I is less than rows. That's obviously the condition's been met. All right, 0 is less than 3. So then we're going to start into our outer for loop, which takes us down to our inner for loop. Now we go 4 int j equals 0. Okay, j is definitely less than columns. And at the end of this, we're going to increment j. So we find ourselves down at the working line. So this is total array 0, right? J equals 0, right? So that's going to be the first element in this two-dimensional array. Total array 0, 0. That's going to be right here. And what are we going to assign to it? We're going to assign to it I, right? And I equals 0. Right? So we're going to put a 0 in there. All right, we did this line. We get down here, all right? J increments, we go back up here, j equals 1. J is less than columns, okay? So we're going to do this again, except now I still equals 0, but j equals 1. So we're total array 0, 1, which will be here. And that equals I. Well, I hasn't incremented. I is still the same. I is still 0. We're putting 0 here. We go to the end of the inner for loop. J increments again. J is now 2. We go back up here. J is still less than columns. Columns, remember, equals 4. All right, so we're going to do this again. I equals 0, J equals 2. So this is 0, 2, total array 0, 2. And again, we're going to assign I, which is still 0. So you can see what we're doing here. We're in each element, we are putting a 0 in everything in this row. Right? Now we get to the end of this, it increments. J now equals 3. We go back up. 3 is definitely still less than columns, which is 4. We go down and print this. This is going to be total array 0, 3 equals 0. So we put this 0 into total array 0, 3, which is going to be over here. J increments. J now equals 4. We go back up and test it in this for loop. J equals 4. 4 is not less than columns. 4 is not less than 4. We kick out of this. All right. We've finished this row. Now we go out to the end of our outer for loop. All right. Now I increments. Okay. I is 1. All right. I is less than rows, which is 4. Now we're back again on our inner for loop. We're going to go through each of the columns again. I'm going to go through this a little bit faster this time. J equals 1 now. 1 is less than columns. All right. I'm sorry. J equals 0. I'm sorry. J equals 0 because we're starting all over again. So we've got total array I1, J0. Just going to put us here. And we're going to assign I. Remember, I is 1 now. Go to the bottom. J increments. J is 1. We go back up here. 1 is less than columns. Total array 1, 1 equals I, which is 1. End of the inner for loop. Right? J increments. We go back up here. J is less than columns, which is 4. So now we're here. We're back inside our working area, our working space. Okay. I equals 0. I equals 1. J equals 2 now. And we're assigning a 1 to this. Remember, this looks like it's two things. It's not. It's one thing. It's one element. It's just like an Excel spreadsheet. It's giving you the row and the column. Right? So we're assigning 1 to total array 1, 2. This loops one more time back, and we assign it to 1, 3. And again, we're still on I equals 1. So you get a feel for this. So we keep looping, looping. This fills this row, 2, 2, and this is the order that it fills it in. 2, 2. Right. We're going back to our last loop of the outer for loop. Right. This is row 3. I equals 3. 3. Right. All right. So that's what the elements, the 16 elements that are in our two-dimensional 4x4 array. Now I want to print them out. One of the things y'all notice here is I used I and J on the first time. It's a good practice now for this next for loop. If you change to K's and L's or M's and N's, change them to something else. You're going to be dealing the same thing. You're going to be dealing with the total array, two-dimensional array, And all this the only thing this will change is the letters. What you're dealing with is the same thing. All right. I assign k, I do the same thing. I define a variable k, assign it the value of 0, compare it against rows. Same thing with L. All right. I go through it, and this is again the working line here. All this is going to do is print it out. This first thing it's going to print out is 0, 0. Watch where the arrow goes. Then it's going to print out 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, 3. Then it's going to be 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 3. Then it's going to print out 2, 0, 2, 1, 2, 2, 2, 3. All right. Then it's going to print out 3, 0, 3, 1, 3, 2, and 3, 3. Right, that's our 16 variables. It's going to print it out like that. All right. I've made it set with left, right? And it'll look something like this. All right. So it just printed them out in order. Again, if I want these to print out in a two-dimensional array, what I do is after the inner for loop, which is working a row, that's a test question. That's an exam question. How does a two-dimensional array process its elements? It does it by rows. All right. It might be multiple choice and say might say by columns. It might say something else, but the answer is it processes them by rows. So here I'm just going to put C out and del. Now after every row, it's going to go back and start again. Right. All right. This isn't what we're going to be working on, but there's little things you can do with this that actually to play with this. If I change this, let's see, to right here, make this I times j, just think about that. All right. It's just going to, as it increments through, it's going to make a multiplication table. So let me run this, or something similar to a multiplication table. It's going to multiply I and j and assign it to the element as it works through a two-dimensional array. So let me run this and show you. All right, these zeros skew it, and the way to fix, but I want you to see, if you look down in the bottom left-hand corner, the 3 by 3 array, look at this, 2 times 2 equals 4, 3 times 2 equals 6, 3 times 3 equals 9. So there's certain things you could do to maybe even clean that up some. Let me see. Let me just start printing this out at 1 instead of 0. All right. Now, you've got what I said, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 2 times 2 is 4, 3 times 3 is 9. If we want to make this a little more, I don't know, something a little more interesting, I make this 10. This is why you make constants. Now, I only have to change it here, and it changes the whole program. All right, I make a 10 by 10 array, a two-dimensional array, hit debugger, and there's actually a nice little neat multiplication table. 9 times 9 is 81. 8 times 6 is 48. So I think that's pretty cool, right? I'd suggest if you wonder how it works, just trace it through. Just remember that I and j is going to keep multiplying. And as you work your way through, what's going to happen? It's going to work through row 1 or row 0. Then it's going to work through row 1. Then it's going to work through row 2. Then it's going to work through row 3, populating by always multiplying I times j. right? Then you print it out and you've got you a nice little neat multiplication table. Again, I'd suggest maybe watching this video twice. And I can't stress enough reading the book and actually giving this some study time. This isn't something that just somebody shows you once and pops in your head. You have to work at it. You have to give this some effort. This is one that I've seen people just like give up on this real easy and say, "Oh, I don't get this." Now you got to work for this one. Two-dimensional arrays. Once you get them down, you'll think, "Whew, that's easy. That's fun." But until you get down the actual mechanics of it and a total understanding, it can be a little daunting. All right, so there won't be a third video. I will post a program, and it's not going to be a real hard one. I'm going to make something fairly easy for you to work your way through, and I will post it, and it won't be due until after we meet next Tuesday, which is Halloween. For my CIS 114 class at Thomas More, you all can tell this is probably one of the, not the first, but I think it maybe is the second or third video I've made specifically for you guys. This is because I'm not going to be at school not tomorrow night. I'm making this on Monday night, and I'm not going to be at school on Tuesday. So this is sort of our video and our lecture portion. All right. Guys, good luck. If you have questions, email me. I'm willing to look at code. I don't respond well to, I don't get it or something like that. But if you give me a good, solid question and show me that you give it a good try and you send me some code, I'm willing to look at it and respond. All right, guys, you have a good week, and I will see you on Halloween night.